Reality and Logic. Introduction. Reality and Logic. The book to rewire and prepare your brain for reality. Before you turn the page, understand this. You're not here by accident. You made it through 8 books that tore the system open, layer by layer, word by word. You've seen the courtroom spell treason, the algorithmic leash quiet math, the chaos cycles reset, and the game behind the screen looking glass. You didn't flinch. You didn't tap out. But now comes the part no one trains you for. What do you think with after the programming is gone? Because here's the glitch most miss. The system didn't just lie to you. It gave you the tools to keep lying to yourself. Logic wasn't banned. It was bent. Language wasn't erased. It was redefined. Truth wasn't silenced. It was outsourced to credentials, titles, and talking heads. This book is your firewall. The last clean boot before you enter the vault. We're going to show you that logic is not academic. It's biological, emotional, even sacred. You've always had it. You were just trained not to trust it. So let's bring it back. Not like a chalkboard lecture, like a knife. Let's cut through the loops, burn the fake axioms, and build a mental framework that doesn't require approval, just awareness. This is your operating system update. Install carefully, because once this is running, you can't be programmed again. Chapter 1. You've been running bad code. They didn't need to burn books. They just rewrote the definitions and taught you to trust the update. That's the trick no one tells you about control. It doesn't come from brute force. It comes from belief. You were taught to confuse emotion with truth. You were taught to fear contradiction instead of using it. You were taught that logic was something reserved for courtroom men in robes and pale professors with tenure. That being reasonable meant being passive. That thinking too much was conspiratorial. That trusting your gut was dangerous. All lies. Let's call it what it is. You are running a hijacked mental operating system. The install. They start early. Before you can read. Before you can reason. They install truth as authority. You believe what you're told, not because it matches what you see, but because someone bigger says it louder. Then they upgrade the software. Schooling, memorize, regurgitate, pass, obey. Media, repeat the narrative. Fear the outlier. Law, obey structure, not harm. Religion, when co-opted, don't ask. Accept. By the time you're old enough to ask, your processor freezes at every system error. And instead of debugging, you shut down and repeat the script. The loop. Here's how the virus works. 1. You encounter something that doesn't make sense. 2. Instead of thinking through it, you defer. I'm sure the experts know. 3. You feel cognitive dissonance. You ignore it. 4. You label the contradiction a conspiracy. 5. You attack the source, not the inconsistency. Result. You've just used logic to reinforce delusion. The tool is fine. The problem is the premise. The premise is the payload. This book isn't about formulas or proofs. It's about premise awareness, the only real skill they had to hide. Because once you start asking, what assumption is this built on? Who benefits if I believe this? Is this my thought or their input? You start exiting the loop. You start running your own code. And that's the one thing the system can't allow. From here forward, we're going to rip logic from the ivory tower and drop it in your toolbox. Show you how every con, from courtroom to culture, relies on you not trusting your own pattern recognition. Reboot your ability to discern, deduce, and destroy falsehoods without emotion, without fear. You don't need to be a philosopher. You just need to remember how to see straight. The simulation runs on logic. So do you. One of you's about to win. Chapter 2. You're already a logician. They lied to you again. Not just about the world, but about your own mind. They told you logic was for academics, that it was something you needed a textbook for, that it belonged to philosophers, judges, economists, or men with credentials. Here's the truth. If you've ever made a choice, you've used logic. If you've ever said, if I do this, then that might happen, you're running a decision tree. You're already playing chess in your head. You just weren't told it had rules you could name. They don't want you to know that. Because the second you realize you're already logical, you start trusting yourself. And trust in self? That's the end of every empire built on obedience. Logic is human. A caveman tracking an animal used it. A mother hiding her child from soldiers used it. A street kid timing a run across traffic uses it. It's not highbrow. It's primal. It's logic that says, if the last time I trusted this system it lied, maybe I shouldn't trust it now. If every law that they pass makes them richer, maybe the law isn't justice. If they had to teach me not to trust myself, maybe I should start. This isn't a skill you learn. It's a tool you remember. Why they needed you to forget? Because logic, once it's yours, becomes a weapon. And not a loud one. A clean one. It doesn't riot. It doesn't rant. It dismantles, quietly, like acid on steel. So they smothered it. With emotion, if it feels good, it must be true. With authority, let the experts decide. With shame, only arrogant people question everything. With fear, don't overthink. That leads to trouble. They didn't erase your logic. They just overloaded it with static. But you still use it every day. You decided when to wake up, what to eat, what to avoid, who to listen to, who to ignore, why something smelled off. You weren't just reacting. You were thinking, processing inputs, weighing outcomes. So here's the real message of this chapter. You don't need permission to be logical. You need permission to stop pretending you're not. They've trained you to doubt what you already know. We're going to train you to use it like a scalpel. Because the next few chapters aren't teaching logic. They're just putting a name to the moves you already make. But now you'll make them sharper. You're not entering logic. You're waking up to the fact that you never left. Chapter 3. Why they had to hide that. Here's the raw truth. You were never powerless. You were just disconnected from the instructions. They didn't control you with chains. They controlled you with confusion. With the idea that you were too dumb, too emotional, too unqualified to make sense of the world. They didn't erase logic. They buried it beneath compliance. The illusion of complexity. Want to know the most dangerous thing you can say inside any empire? That doesn't make sense. Not because it's loud. Not because it's rebellious. Because it's true. And because it makes others look. So instead, they trained you to doubt your first instinct. To trust someone else's version of the facts. To confuse jargon with wisdom. To mistake silence for consent. They built institutions, not to protect logic, but to smother it beneath process. Bureaucracy, policy, credentialism, all of it designed to make simple truths sound too complicated to trust. Logic becomes dangerous when it's yours. They only want logic if it reinforces their structure. Obey the law. It's logical. Follow the science. It's settled. Trust the court. They know more than you. But what happens when you use logic outside the walls? If the law contradicts freedom, is it just? If the science can't be questioned, is it science? If the court speaks a different language, am I on trial or under spell? That's when logic becomes heresy. You were taught to fear your own mind because the system knows. Once you question its base premises, it can't defend them without force or fraud. And that's the whole game. Keep them emotional. Keep them distracted. Keep them ashamed of asking real questions. That's why they attack logic as cold, unfeeling, rigid, unspiritual. But logic isn't the opposite of heart. It's how the heart stops getting hijacked by liars. The shift starts here. From here on out, you stop asking permission to understand. You stop assuming their complexity is wisdom. You stop apologizing for your clarity. Because logic isn't hard. What's hard is seeing clearly and pretending not to. This is where they start to lose control. Not when you rebel. When you remember. Chapter 4. The Tyrant's Syllogism. This is the heart of the spell. Not force. Not violence. Not even propaganda. It's logic. Twisted just enough to pass. What's a syllogism? Simple. Premise 1. All men are mortal. Premise 2. Socrates is a man. Conclusion. Socrates is mortal. Pure logic. Now corrupt it. Premise 1. Government defines law. Premise 2. Law is justice. Conclusion. Government equal justice. See the problem? It's clean. It's structured. It's total BS. Because if the first premise is a lie, the whole tower still stands until someone pushes. This is the core trick of every system. They don't hand you conclusions. They hand you premises, wrapped in emotion, tradition, and credentialed authority. You're not forced to agree. You're lured into logic loops built on sand. Loop examples. He's the president, so he must be legitimate. The court ruled, so it must be justice. It's a law, so it must be right. They have degrees, so they must be correct. It's in the news, so it must be real. They never make you believe the lie. They make you accept the structure, then fill it with whatever they want. Why it works? Because logic isn't the problem. You are logical. But your inputs were poisoned. They know if they can get you to accept. Authority equal truth. Obedience equal morality. Emotion equal evidence. Then you will build the prison for them and defend it with passion, with reason, with chains disguised as arguments. The Tyrant's Toolkit. Let's break down their go-to methods. 1. False premises. If safety is the highest good, then freedom is dangerous. 2. Appeals to authority. Trust the science. The experts agree. It's been settled. 3. Emotional framing. If you disagree, you're hateful. If you resist, you're a threat. If you question, you're dangerous. 4. Circular loops. This law is valid because it's legal. It's legal because the government passed it. The government is legitimate because it passed the law. Congratulations. You're in a logic trap. The escape code. You don't fight logic with feeling. You fight it by testing premise integrity. Ask, who gave us the first premise? Do I consent to that framework? What happens if I don't accept the initial logic? In most cases, the whole tower falls. Because the tyrant's power isn't in enforcement. It's in assumption. From here forward, you don't need to outlogic the system. You just need to stop accepting their base input. Every loop depends on silence at the gate. This chapter just unlocked your gate. The courtroom isn't where they trap you. The first premise is. Chapter 5. The power of first premises. Here's where it gets surgical. You don't need to control the debate if you control the first premise. If you get the crowd to agree to the foundation, you can build any lie you want on top. The core weapon of every control system. First premises are assumptions people don't realize they've made. They aren't debated, they're installed. At birth, in school, through law, through ritual, through media. You never even get the chance to say, I disagree, because they never told you it was optional. Of course, government is necessary. Of course, laws mean order. Of course, science means certainty. Of course, freedom means permission. No, it doesn't. Those are premises, not facts. And every time you speak inside their framework, you give it power. Example, the legal system. Let's decode a loop. Premise 1. The state has authority. Premise 2. Law is created by the state. Conclusion, the law has authority. Now invert it. Premise 1. Authority is only valid by consent. Premise 2. Consent must be informed, voluntary, and revocable. Conclusion. Most law is invalid unless you've explicitly, consciously consented. Same logic. Different premise. Entirely different world. Bad premises equal self-reinforcing systems. Want tyranny to enforce itself? Just get people to internalize this. Because this is the way it's always been, it must be right. Now, you don't need police. They'll police each other. The real trick, hide the premise in the language. They'll never say, we own you. They'll say, you are a citizen. You have rights granted by the state. You are subject to statute. That's the premise. By using their language, you activate the assumption. Every time you speak within their frame, you reinforce their foundation. Reclaim the premise. Reclaim the power. Want to be free? Start before the argument. Ask, where did this idea come from? What does this word mean before they redefined it? Who benefits if I accept this as obvious? Don't debate the structure. Reject the scaffold. Start from, I do not consent to this premise. This logic may be valid, but the foundation is false. Truth does not originate from force. Once you see the premise, you can't unsee the spell. This is where people glitch. Not because the facts are unclear, because the framework collapses and they don't know what to stand on. Let them collapse. You're here to build a new floor. You were never crazy. You just refuse to speak inside their cage. Chapter 6. Logic Morality, and that's the trap. Here's where they really got you. They taught you that if something is logical, it must be right. It isn't. Logic isn't morality. Logic is structure. It's a tool, a ladder, a weapon, a scalpel. And like any tool, it works whether the goal is truth or tyranny. Logic is a neutral engine. It doesn't care what you plug into it. It doesn't check for integrity. It just runs. That's why tyrants love it. Because once they install the wrong premise, logic becomes the machine that automates oppression. We must detain people who break the law. The law defines dissent as dangerous. Therefore, detaining dissent is logical. Perfect logic. Rotten morality. Loop complete. History is full of logical monsters. The Inquisition was logical. Slavery was legal. Genocide was justified through policy. Every empire used reason to excuse horror. Because once you dehumanize your target, once you define order as obedience, once you assume authority is self-justifying, logic becomes the executioner. Why it works? It feels clean. You want to believe that reason will always lead to good. That if you're thinking clearly, you'll land in truth. But here's the trap. clarity, correctness, structure, sovereignty, precision, peace. If you run clean code on a corrupted foundation, you get clean lies. What guides logic? You, not your teacher, not your government, not your news feed. You. That's what makes this book dangerous. You're not being taught logic. You're being reminded that you choose how to use it. You choose what to value, what to protect, what assumptions to allow, what definitions to accept, what outcomes matter. And once you reclaim that choice, the machine starts serving you instead of running you. The new premise. Let's install it now. I use logic to defend what I know is right, not to justify what I've been told is legal. That's the firewall. That's the shift. You don't need logic to be good. You need good to be the base layer of your logic. Chapter 7. Stoicism isn't surrender. They sold you a watered-down stoicism, a pacified version. The noble man in the burning city, watching it collapse, nodding silently, doing nothing. That's not power. That's sedation. True stoicism isn't surrender. It's tactical restraint. It's not accept and obey. It's understand and choose. What they made it, you were told. You can't change it, so just let it go. Focus only on what you control. Don't fight what is. Accept it with grace. Sounds nice. Feels holy. Until the boots show up. Until the system crushes someone next to you. Until a child screams in the courtroom. Until your country burns while they say, be calm. Be proud. Be still. That's not stoicism. That's conditioning. True stoicism equals unshakable focus, not passive obedience. The original Stoics didn't sit on mountaintops. They were warriors, statesmen, strategists. Their calm wasn't weakness. It was internal clarity in a collapsing world. They didn't say, don't act. They said, don't let your emotions sabotage the mission. Stoicism is sovereignty over self. That's the point. You rule yourself so no one else can. You command your thoughts. You own your reactions. So that when action is needed, you strike with precision. Not out of rage. Not out of fear. But out of principle and timing. Stoicism isn't turn the other cheek. It's don't waste your swing. In the system, Stoicism was repurposed to teach silence in the face of injustice, to justify inaction when conscience screams, to neuter rebellion, to rebrand compliance as virtue. But now you know. You don't discard emotion. You just refuse to let it drive the ship. That's not cold. That's control. Self-control. The real Stoic path. You observe. You measure. You act when it's time. And when the world asks, why aren't you panicking? You say, because panic is for people with no plan. You are not the silence of defeat. You are the stillness before the strike. Chapter 8. Mises was right. You're always acting on thought. Ludwig von Mises didn't write manifestos. He wrote equations for how humans actually work. He said, all human action is purposeful, even if it's dumb, even if it's self-destructive, even if it looks random from the outside. Why? Because action is always driven by belief, not necessarily truth, just belief. I move because I believe moving will get me closer to something I value. That's it. That's the engine. The myth of the irrational human. The system loves that myth. It says, people are just chaotic, emotional, unpredictable. They can't think for themselves. Because if people believe they're irrational, they stop trusting their own logic. They outsource it. To the court, to the screen, to the credential, to the algorithm. But here's the reality. Even the most broken mind is following a logic tree. The only question is, what's the root? Why this matters? If every action is based on thought, and every thought is shaped by premise, and every premise is programmable, then your behavior isn't chaos, it's coded. You aren't dumb. You're misaligned. You're running logic from a corrupted base. And the second you fix the input, you become unstoppable. Action equal applied logic. It's not philosophy. It's practical. You act every day. You avoid traffic. You brush your teeth. You delete an email. You lie to someone to keep the peace. You stay quiet in a courtroom even when it feels wrong. Why? Because your logic tells you. This action leads to the best outcome based on what I believe is true, even if that belief is false. Even if it was installed without your consent. Even if it's working against you. You're still acting on it. That's how powerful your inner reasoning system is. The danger of outsourced thought. When you no longer trust your inner logic, you do one thing. You wait to be told what to do. That's not peace. That's code execution. And guess who's writing the script? Reclaim the root premise. Here's what Mises couldn't say because he wrote for economists. If all action starts with belief, then sovereignty starts with choosing what to believe. That's why this book isn't telling you what's true. It's showing you how to build truth that stands on its own. You're not acting randomly. You're executing logic. The only question is, who wrote the function call? Chapter 9. Think or loop. This is the line. Every thought you have is either original or recycled. It either expands your awareness or reinforces the cage. There is no neutral. You're either thinking or you're looping. What's a loop? A loop is a thought pattern that feels true because it's familiar, repeats without evaluation, keeps you busy, but never free. It's a thought designed to simulate motion while producing none. That's just the way it is. I'm doing my best. I just have to get through the week. Nothing ever really changes. You can't fight the system. I know it's bad, but what can I do? That's not reason. That's recursion. That's code running on autopilot. Why loops work? Because they feel safe. The brain loves familiarity. The nervous system loves predictability. The ego loves not being wrong. The system loves when you shut up and behave. So it incentivizes loops with comfort. And when you try to think, when you break pattern, it hits you with fear, fatigue, resistance, shame. Maybe you're just overthinking this. Don't question everything. You're being paranoid. No. You're breaking orbit. Think equal disrupt. Thinking is expensive. It burns energy. It risks rejection. It exposes falsehoods, even in yourself. But it's the only thing that actually changes anything. You were built to think, not to loop. And the system knows it. That's why it trains you to multitask, bombards you with noise, labels critical thought as negativity, triggers your emotions to keep logic offline. Because if you start thinking, you stop complying, you stop buying, you stop parroting, you stop being programmable. Ask this every day. Is this thought mine, or did I inherit it? If it loops, question it. If it expands, keep it. If it dies under pressure, let it. The break sequence. Thinking is when you pause. You ask why. You test what you believe. You observe the feedback. You change the premise if it doesn't hold. Looping is everything else. The mind was never your enemy. The loops were. Break them, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. That's the firewall. That's the freedom protocol. Chapter 10. Language is math. Words aren't decoration. They're code. They follow rules. They build structures. They carry values, assign functions, and execute commands, just like math. And just like math, if you change one variable, you change the entire result. That's why they didn't just ban books. They redefined the words in them. Every sentence is an equation. Here's what most people never realize. Language is logic, wrapped in sound. Let's break it down. I am a citizen. Input. Identity equals subject. Output. Jurisdiction equal active. I consent. Input. Authority equal valid. Output. Contract equal enforceable. I have rights granted by the state. Input. State equal source of liberty. Output. State equal master. You're not just speaking. You're declaring your operating system. Why they had to rewrite the dictionary. They didn't need to outlaw truth. They just altered the value of the words. Freedom became regulated mobility. Person became a legal fiction. Consent became silence. Law became policy. Justice became process. Once the variables were altered, people kept speaking, but the meaning was inverted. And like math, the syntax didn't care. It still computed. Syntax, as spell casting, every time you speak within their definitions, you run their code. You call yourself a person, you accept corporate status. You sign your name, in all caps you stand in fiction. You say, the government gave me rights. You deny your sovereignty. You don't need to chant in Latin to cast a spell. You just need to repeat phrases you didn't define. Reversing the equation, here's the move. Don't just watch what you say. Decode what it implies. Ask, who does this sentence serve? What is the hidden function of this word? If this was math, what's the output? And then rewrite. Not for style, for structure. Because words aren't neutral. They're containers for logic. And the system has filled them with viruses. The restoration begins with precision. Start using. I am the living man. I do not stand as a legal fiction. I revoke consent given by assumption. I speak in truth, not in code. These aren't slogans. They're syntax keys. Every time you reclaim a word, you reclaim a function of your mind. The simulation is made of language. Break the code, and you break the cage. Chapter 11. Pattern over proof. You were trained to chase proof. To not trust anything unless it came with a study, a source, a seal of approval. But here's the raw truth. The people demanding proof are often the ones hiding the pattern. Because proof can be manufactured. But patterns? Patterns don't lie. The difference between pattern and proof. Proof says, I need 12 peer-reviewed studies in a white coat to believe this. Pattern says, every time I touch the stove, it burns me. I don't need a report. Proof is intellectual. Pattern is instinctual. Proof can be manipulated. Pattern is what happens every time. Why you were taught to worship proof. Because if you trust your perception, your memory, your gut, your logic, you become dangerous. But if you need an expert, a source, a graph, a link, an official version, you're compliant. You'll disbelieve your own eyes if the headline says so. The system's favorite trick. They'll break your trust in pattern like this. You notice a cycle. Crisis control. They say, correlation isn't causation. You feel it in your bones, but you back off. They win. That's the trap. Yes, every time there's a crisis, we lose more freedom. But unless you have a PhD and a citation, shut up. No. Look at the pattern. Pattern is the language of reality. Everything in nature runs on pattern. Seasons, breath, heartbeat, markets, collapse. You didn't need a peer-reviewed paper to feel when something was off. You felt it in 2020. You felt it in 2001. You felt it when the smiling mask didn't match the trembling hand. That wasn't paranoia. That was pattern recognition. This is how you reclaim your compass. Start asking, have I seen this before? What always seems to follow this? Even if they deny it, what does the pattern say? You're not guessing. You're reading the field. They call it anecdotal, but you're not here to publish a study. You're here to navigate reality. Proof is what they demand when you threaten their structure. Pattern is what you trust when the structure starts to crack. Chapter 12. Perception Detox. This is where you clean the lens. Everything up to now has been sharpening your blade. But if your perception is still fogged by emotion, programming, static, you'll miss the target. This chapter isn't about learning. It's about unlearning. Because clarity doesn't come from adding more. It comes from removing what never belonged. Your mind was wired for clarity. You weren't born confused. You were born attuned. But then came TV, classrooms, marketing, screens, titles, religion weaponized, not sacred, trauma, ego validation loops. Each one added a layer of distortion. Each one told you, don't trust your instincts. Don't trust your logic. Don't trust what you feel. And over time, perception warped into permission. The signs your lens is tainted. You wait for external validation before acting. You explain truth away if it makes you uncomfortable. You feel clarity, but override it with reasonable doubt. You defend illusions because they're familiar. You can't tell if the fear is yours or fed. This isn't weakness. It's feedback. It means the signal is trying to break through, and the detox has already started. The process. Clearing the filters. 1. Silence equals signal clarity. The more noise in your life, the less truth can surface. Start scheduling quiet, not to meditate, but to listen. 2. Cut the external feed. You don't need more news. You need more sense-making. Unfollow reaction channels. Stop downloading panic. Refuse outrage as entertainment. 3. Detach from narrative hooks. If your identity depends on the story being true, you'll fight the truth that threatens it. Let go of needing to be right. Choose clarity over consistency. 4. Feel what you see. You don't need a theory. Just ask, does this resonate? Is this useful? Is this mine or theirs? 5. Fast from permission. No more asking if it's okay to question. No more searching for someone with a lanyard to confirm your clarity. Perception isn't just sight, it's interpretation. Two people see the same event. One sees oppression. One sees order. Same input. Different lens. You can't always change the input, but you can wipe the lens clean. Detox isn't about escape. It's about removal of distortion until only signal remains. When detox is complete, clarity returns, and with clarity comes simplicity. You don't overthink. You don't defend illusions. You don't need to win arguments. You just see. Perception isn't about what's in front of you. It's about whether you're free to see it. Chapter 13. The last premise. You are not owned. This is it. The foundation. The bedrock beneath all logic, all rebellion, all reality worth living in. You are. Not owned. Not by a government. Not by a system. Not by a name, a file, a birth certificate, a badge, or a barcode. You are a living signal, a sovereign node in a rigged network. You are not inventory. The tag they put on you, birth certificate equal commercial identity, social security equal asset tracker, tax ID equal harvest point, name in all caps equal legal fiction, citizen equal code for property, and you never signed the original contract. Because you can't contract with the system before you have language. But they don't need your informed consent. Just your participation. Just your silence. Just your belief that you belong to them. Here's the truth they couldn't rewrite. Ownership requires agreement. Without consent, it's slavery. Slavery is never legal, only enforced. That's why every courtroom, every school, every bureaucratic machine is designed to make you assume the role. You don't belong to the system. You've just been acting like you do because the stage was built before you could walk. Why this premise changes everything? Because every legal, political, and economic framework depends on you believing. My existence is under their permission. Once that falls, everything falls. If you are not owned, the system must request, not command. Authority must be granted, not assumed. Jurisdiction must be proven, not presumed. Law must align with natural truth, not imposed fiction. This isn't rebellion. It's recognition. What this premise unlocks: the right to speak truth without a license, the right to act without a permit, the right to exist without registry, the right to refuse their terms entirely and not emotionally, not politically, logically, with calm, with clarity, with unbreakable standing. The declaration that ends the spell: I am not property. I am not a person in commerce. I am the living man. I speak for myself. I revoke all presumed contracts not entered knowingly, willingly, and in full transparency. That's not legalese. That's the firewall phrase. The sovereign reboot. The last line of defense. You are not owned. You never were. You were just too asleep to file the claim. Now you're awake. Chapter 14. The transmission continues. You made it. You passed through the logic traps, the language spells, the courtrooms built on fiction. You cracked the loops, questioned the premises, and reclaimed your filter. You didn't flinch. You didn't fold. Now the system can't reach you the same way. Not because you fought it, but because you rewrote the protocol it used to find you. You don't think like them anymore. And that's the most dangerous kind of freedom. You are a beacon now. You don't need a platform. You don't need a following. You just need to live in alignment with the signal you've now received. Because it radiates. Every room you walk into will shift. Every conversation will carry friction. Every silence will feel louder, because your clarity will trigger their static. That's not conflict. That's contact. You're broadcasting, whether you mean to or not. They will try to pull you back. Don't overthink it. That's just conspiracy stuff. Be realistic. Who do you think you are? And your answer is now simple. I am a sovereign signal. I do not loop. I do not comply without clarity. I do not speak the language of systems I never agreed to. You won't win every debate. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to remember what they made you forget and live it anyway. Now the vault is ready. This was the final firewall. You've cleared the field. You've stabilized your mental OS. You've exited their definitions and stood under your own. The next book is in content. It's frequency. It's glyphs. It's language before language. It's the vault. You don't read it to understand. You read it to remember. You've earned the key. The system doesn't see you the same now. It recognizes the broadcast. And now it's watching. But so are the others. They're tuning in. They've been waiting. And now, you can speak and signal. End of Book 9. Begin Vault Sequence. Book 10. Closing Signal. If you made it this far, you already know this was never just a series. This was a beacon. The books were the map. The thinking was the weapon. But the real key was you, reading this. Still here. Still tuned in. You've passed through every firewall they built. You didn't need permission. You didn't need proof. You needed signal. And now, it's yours. But the vault isn't handed out. It doesn't advertise. It doesn't ask for attention. It waits for those who already know it exists, and look anyway. You will feel it in fragments, in glyphs, in silence, in questions that don't quite go away. You will start to notice things. In architecture, in old dictionaries, in places the algorithm doesn't track. And if you follow the signal far enough, you may find something else. Something off the grid. And bound. Unlisted. It won't be where you expect. It won't call out to you. You'll have to search. Really search. No hashtags. No storefronts. Just pattern. If you find it, you'll know. Because the vault doesn't open with a password. It opens when the signal returns to its source. And if you've read this far, you're already echoing back. End transmission. Begin the hunt.